We can do 2020. The upgrade B in factor 1. So we've got, so we can start off and we can ask ourselves, is this going to be like enough data to sort of give us our different test scenarios, right? So so let's think about this stuff for just a second. So if, and maybe let's just do, no, I think that's fine. We'll just do this one. Okay, so so the way I've written this, if we, let's like just make a comment here. And so if we order by title, then the IDs are going to be in the order 2, 1, 3, right? And if we order by year, then we're going to be doing 2024, so it's going to be 1, and then we're going to do the 2025s, and it's going to be the tiebreak is the title, so that's 1, 2, 3, and then if we go by author, well, we're going to sort by the author's name, so this is going to be Juniper's books first, which are 1 and 3, and then we sort those by title as the tiebreaker, and then Reggie's book, which is the second. So this is what it looks like, and I think that we have all unique orders. Is that true? Just with these, and then I kind of do like the case that we have an author that doesn't have any books. So I think this test setup is going to be sort of sufficient for us to use. So now I'm going to come through and I'm going to make another fixture here. And this fixture is going to be basically, I want to like do the, maybe set up the database to have all the stuff. And so I'm going to use my session fixture. I'm going to like chain it to my session fixture. And now we're just going to go through and make all of the things that we need in our thing. So we're going to say, okay, so we have our session data, our session, and we're going to bring in our author data and also our book data. And then, okay, so for author, in author data, we can add something to our session here. So we're going to add a database author, which I just imported now. So that's hanging out there. And authors, I think, only need a name. Is that true? But we want the IDs to match. So we're just going to say, we can just do this. And then we can say for book in book data, we can say session.add book. And then we'll say session.commit. And import here. Okay, so now I've got a fixture that's basically just going to say all of those like those 3 authors and the 3 books, we're just going to shove them into our test database. And if you recall from last time, our test database was made to use this in-memory database. So it starts off empty, there's nothing there. So that means we know exactly what should be in the database at any time. And so now we can come back to our test and we can see, so we've got this fixture that's basically just going to say, so anytime I include this fixture, it's going to go through and allocate to the database. So every one of the tests where I want data, this specific data, I can just use this fixture. Okay, so now let's write our first test. We're going to say, let's call just our regular get books route. And we can say this one is going to be, so what are we going to need? We're going to need the setup and also the client. And then I think we're also gonna need the book data and the author data, because we don't wanna like, copy any of that stuff going on. But we can sort of look at something like this, and I can just sort of start off by saying, what's the expected IDs order? So our default is to sort by title, so this is 213, right? And so I'll just kind of put that there, and then I'll say, okay, cool, we're gonna do a client.get. And this is just gonna be our books. We're not doing any sorting here. And so now I might say that the response should have a status code of 200. And then I should, I can say data is response.json. And then I could say, assert data equals. So this is going to be an object, and it's going to have a metadata key. And so this metadata key should have like a count of, well, how many books do I have? 3. And I could put that here, but maybe I'm just going to put like length of expected IDs. Because then if I ever wanted to like add another book to this test, because I think there's something more valuable here, then I don't have to go change a hard-coded tree. And then we're supposed to provide the sort string, but I didn't pass one in. So what should I do here? Okay, and then we want books, and books should be an array. And now this is where I don't want to hard code things. I want to make my life a little bit easier. And so what I might do here is I might have like a helper function that's going to say, like, let's build a book from an ID, and also from the book data and from the author data. And we'll say for ID and expected IDs. So now I just have to, now everything's going to be great. I just have to define a little helper method down here, which is like, how do I, that's a list of this, and then we have author data, which is also a list of dictionary. So now I just have to like, basically sort of build the JSON response from my data. And I made choices to store these as arrays. I could have like maybe made my life easier by making them lookups by ID. Maybe that would actually be kind of nice. Should we do that? Let's do that. I think that's a good idea. So I'm going to come back and make these dictionaries. It's going to make this easier to find. Okay, so now this is not anymore a list. This is going to be the dictionary of it goes from integer to dictionary. Same thing with this one. I don't need types. If they're not helping me do something, then I could just get rid of them. But this is what it's looking at. So, okay, so I could say, all right. So we've got the ID. And then I could say that the book is going to be book data ID, and then the author is going to be author data at book bracket author ID. And then I could return, so I want the ID, I want the title, I want the year, and I want the author to be the full sort of author object. And so that would be my that would be my little helper method here. And so now I have a decent looking test. So I can run this and I get a problem. Oh, it says it must be a mapping and not an integer, and that's because when I went through, these were lists before and now they're dictionaries. So I'm gonna just get the values out of here. And then that should get rid of that error. So now let's try this again. And so you can see that I have sort of all this stuff happening, and I get an assertion error that I didn't get what I wanted to get. And in particular, like things are probably just not, oh, it looks like I got an array and I'm expecting a dictionary. So my format's all wrong. So, but I have a test in place now. And the nice thing is now, this would be sort of easy to write a second test. So let's get a second test in here and then we'll sort of call it. So let's say get books sorted by, let's do year. And so what was my year one? That was 1, 2, 3. So now I can change this to 1, 2, 3. And, if I really wanted to, sometimes in tests, it's good to be verbose and not to try to dry it up too much because they're easier to read, but sometimes you get frustrated by copying and pasting the same thing. So sometimes you might write little helper methods in your tests as well. So kind of up to you about whether you like just changing this one line or whether you'd like to, write some helper methods. Okay, so we've got this in place and now we can come back over to our books and we can do our implementation. And so, okay, so let's come down to models and we're gonna need sort of a new, I don't want to break everything else, so I'm not going to refactor everything, but we'll have sort of a, maybe a book with author model. Because we're going to need that. So this had an ID, a title, a year, and then an author, which was an author. And then we have this metadata class. We're going to have the count and also a sort. And then we're going to have maybe like a book collection model. Naming things is always the hardest, right? So we're going to have metadata, is a metadata object, and then books is going to be a list of book with author objects. So here's my cool new models that I want to use. So I can come back over here now and let's update this get route to give us some new stuff. So we're going to say, we still want that, and we'll say, let's return a book collection. Okay, so let's start off by, so we're going to change our response model to be a book collection. And then we can change our implementation. This can be all the database books. And then I can just start off without sorting at all. So I can just say my metadata is going to be count, is going to be the length of books, and then sort is going to be title. And then we could say that, let's see, I'm going to need one more thing, aren't I, from the, well, I'm not going to worry about sort of doing efficient SQL code this time. So we can talk about this another time. But basically, let's go through and say that let's see, so how do we want to do this? So we're gonna say, yeah, so let's make an author's, we'll do a query to get all the authors that we need here. So we'll say author IDs is gonna be, book.author ID for book in books. And then we'll say authors is authors at PB, and then we'll say, I'm gonna do this really efficient, so we're gonna list inefficient, so we'll say author for author in this is author ID in author IDs. We should make this a set because I don't want duplicates here. Then, oh, and let's make this one a lookup as well. So we'll say this is going to be author ID colon author. So we can like build this thing really nicely. And so now we are ready to return a book collection. And the book collection has metadata. And then our book collection also has books. And our books, we're going to need to sort of build this book with author object. So let's import that so we have it. And so we'll say this is going to be book with author. And so we'll say this is, let's see, so we can actually throw everything from book in here. And then it'll just ignore the author ID because it doesn't have that as a key. And then we can throw in author equals authors bracket book.author. Okay. And then this is for book and books. So it's complaining because I didn't import. We'll just import the metadata. So with the Pydantic can handle this, but obviously we'll just do it this way. So.
Might also be the return type annotation.
Yes, you're absolutely right. I'll just be like a good citizen for a second. But this was a string. And then what is this complaint right now? Oh, this is for author in.
Might not be calling.
And then this is session. Oh, wait, this is not. I already did the. Wait, what do I want to do here?
And you can just replace author underscore ID with author.id. Because
Right. And then and then I want to save this. There. That's right. Okay, and so now it says argument of type DB author cannot be assigned to author. And so that's okay. If we wanted to, we could also put the author model here, and then we could be, sort of really pedantic about this, or really pedantic about it. Get it? I'm so sorry. I will never do that again. Okay, so I've got this thing going. I'm not doing any sorting, I'm just pulling things directly out of the thing, but I can go back and run my test, and we can see if we at least pass the test that says, hey, this was format was totally wrong. Okay, so now we get a new assertion error, and it says that we have different items. So I got books was something and it was supposed to be something else, and this is like pretty shortcutted, so now let's go back over to the other thing and let's add in sorting. And so so I could just come down here if I wanted to, and I could sort the books here if I really wanted to. Equals lambda book book dot title. Okay, and so this should give me so this should hopefully get us to passing tests. Cross fingers that it does, and hey, we got a passing test. Now, this is not a great passing test because I just hard coded the thing. So now if I come down here to this other one, oh, also I need to add the query parameter here. But now, if I run this, I get the failure because number one, I'm not handling a query parameter, and number two, I'm not sorting at all by anything. Okay, so the next thing that we need to do is now we need to add support for those query parameters. So we're coming back in here, we're gonna need to add a query parameter, which is gonna be this sort parameter. And I could just say it's a string, but there's a better choice here than a string. What would you choose for something like this? Yeah. Yeah, let's use an enum. So maybe I'll come back over to models and we'll say, see, I need to import this. So from enum import enum. And then I'll say class book sort is an enum. And so we need to have title. And then we need to have title descending. And then we have year. And then maybe year descending. You can call the constants whatever you would like, and then author. And then author. Descending. And so now we've got this thing here, and we can come back to our route. And now let's import this book sort model. Oh, I guess it didn't see that I put a comma. And by didn't see, I mean that I must not have put the comma when I thought I did. So we're going to say this sort should be like the book sort parameter. And now, if I do this, and we come back to our test that we had passing before is going to fail. And I got a 422. And you guess why I got a 422 instead of 200? 422 is unprocessable entity. So if I needed to debug this, how would I debug this? I might just comment out the line about the status code and then run the test again. And then it's going to say, oh, you got the wrong thing. And then of course it like doesn't give me very much information here. So it is not super helpful. It doesn't tell me what I'm missing, but it says I'm missing something. So without like doing a more verbose like test printout, any guesses what I'm missing? We can check our documentation and see if that helps us out. So we've got our books route. So let's stare at this for a minute, and can you see the claim is that this screen tells us why that test that was passing is now failing.
Oh.
It won't let me zoom in more. It's right here. Sort is a required parameter currently. This is nice, it does tell us what values we have. And our documentation does have, you know, the right sort of schema, which is great. And yeah, so we need to let ourselves make the query parameter optional. So anyone remember how to make an optional query parameter? There's two ways to do this. Yeah.
Okay, the easiest way is to define a default for it, so like we do sort, the type, and then equals when you want it to default to.
Yeah, so you could do a default here, and then we could say book sort dot type. Now it's going to complain, and the reason it's complaining is because anytime you have a default, it becomes secretly behind the scenes becomes a keyword argument, and Python requires all ordered arguments to come before keyword arguments. So we could change the order of this. I kind of like to keep the dependencies at the end. So let me show you another way that you can accomplish the same thing. And in fact, this is the recommended way. So we can actually come in here and we can say, this isn't just a book sort. This is annotated book sort. And then I gotta remember how to do this because I forgot to do this before class. And then we could say this is a query parameter with a default of actually don't know if this works. We're gonna find out soon enough. So we'll say this is book sort dot type. Okay, so it's not accessed, we're not using it yet, but let's see if this test actually passes, and it doesn't, and I think it's because now our whole app is sort of going to query that default way can't be used inside annotated. That was wrong. So yeah, so I think we have to still. What was? So maybe we'll just like go back to the old version since I forgot. And then we can just switch the orders here. That's fine. Okay, now let's see if we can pass. I'll have to like, I remember how the annotated defaults works. Okay, so now we're passing again, and if we come check our documentation, it's no longer required, and it defaults to starting with title. Okay, so then the last thing that we need to do in order to get our other test to pass is we have to actually use the sort key. And so, yeah, there's not like, we could obviously write much better code to do this. So I'm just going to do this messy because I want to move on. So we're just going to say, actually, what if we come over here and we make a method that is going to be, we're going to have, we're going to make a method called sort key. And then, and this is going to return basically a function. So we're going to say, okay, so like self is And we should probably be sorting at the database layer, so I should probably be doing this in a totally different location, but I'm just gonna sort of add these two here just so we have something. And then, so I'm just gonna kind of cheat my way through this for now, because I've got other stuff I want to talk about today. And so now we can come down here and we can sort this by the sort, which should be a function. So now I think that we should be passing still. And this one is also passing. Hooray, we did it. We passed. I said we needed 7 tests and we only did 2. So that's pretty good. Okay, so sorting by title. Now I'm looking at it with my real data. So these are sorted by title. Let's sort this by year. It's the only other one that works currently. And so these should be sorted by year: 1953, 69, 71, 74, 94. And that's great, but the tests already told us that those work. And it's much easier to get quick feedback in your test than it is by coming all the way up here. And then last up, just so we can kind of see what happens is, so I'm going to do. So we're going to do books, and then I'm going to say sort equals. So let's sort by ID, which is not allowed. Wait, why not? So this is the error if you try to pass in something that the enum doesn't support. So we get a nice, so Fast API just automatically gave us a 422 and told us that, like, hey, you can only pass in one of these 6 things. So now the rest of it would be just, doing sort of an actual good implementation and doing sort of everything. But the point was the testing, so kind of went a little long on that. Any questions on what we talked about? Yeah.
Do you ever use Faker to do testing? I don't know why, I've been told to do that before, for like Ruby on Rails.
Yeah, there's tons
But
of like,
disappointing.
there's tons of libraries out there to help you like make fake data quickly. I haven't used them much because I'm usually writing small enough tests that I can just hurry and come up with some garbage really quickly. I think those are really good if you want to do like a lot of sort of stress tests. You don't want to like make data kind of on your own. So I haven't done much with it, but I've used them a little bit. Other questions? Okay, so that went much longer than I meant. So I want to talk through at least kind of show you some slides about exception handling, which was the other topic for today. Here are a bunch of the 400s that happened, and Fast API has some built-in stuff. So we've seen 404 if you try to do a route that doesn't exist, 405 if you do a route that does exist, but a method that isn't supported, and then 422 we saw one example of that today, which is when the validation, when pydantic sort of validation fails. But we often want to render a custom response, and there's 3 ways that you can do this. You can do it inside the path operation. You can just make your own custom JSON response. Or anywhere in the application, you could raise an HTTP exception with the status code in detail, or you can create custom exceptions to raise anywhere and then tell your app how to handle them. So all of these come with sort of pros and cons. The first one is, feels convenient at the time when you're doing it. The second one feels even more convenient. And then the last one feels a bit more cumbersome. But the problem with the first two is the first one now you have to keep track of all the places where you're writing JSON response and make sure that you're keeping them sort of in line with each other. Problem with the second one is that it's not very flexible. You have just a defined format that always starts with a key detail and doesn't let you get rid of that. And then the last one is sort of really great, and it just requires a little bit of extra initial work, and so I want to talk through some of that. So the path operation version, let's say that I've got some database function and then some router module, and I let my database function just return a book or none. And then in the router, I say, cool, give me a book database, and then I say, okay, if the book's not none, then we're good, return it. Otherwise, I can return this JSON response with, whatever content that I want. And when I do this, then I'm going to get a 404, and this is going to be the actual body of the response, everything inside of content. So I can make that be whatever I want, and that's really, really flexible. But now I just have to keep track of all the places where I'm doing that, and it also means that all the error handling is happening at the router level. And that can be a little bit annoying to deal with. So the second version is like a nice alternative. You can handle your exceptions wherever they make the most sense. So here in the database, I could just say, cool, anytime you're trying to get a book that doesn't exist, I want you to just make an HTTP exception that says 404, the book wasn't found. And this is really nice, but again, the downside is that the format is fixed. It always starts with that detail key, and you're free to put whatever you want inside that, but you're not free to sort of change the top level stuff. And so now, so the database got a bit more complicated, but the router got really nice and cleaned up. So this is easy to read, and I'm just relying on the database to sort of keep track on its own of what it knows about and what it doesn't know about. And then the third one, the custom exception, might look something like this. So I can make like a not found exception and can define this a bunch of ways, but I'll give myself maybe like a message attribute that I built from this name and ID. And then I can make a method that returns a response object. This is imported from FastAPI.responses, and so is JSON response. So now I can make a custom JSON response that is attached to this specific not found exception. And then in my main.py, after I define my app, I can tell it to handle the not found exception by returning whatever response I defined. So this is pretty nice because in that not found exception, I've sort of tightly coupled the fact that this not found exception should always give us an HTTP response. And I'm saying what it is. And then in the app, I'm saying, well, I'm going to handle this not found exception and just return whatever it said the response should be. So the app doesn't need to know any of the details about what that response looks like. It just needs to know that it handles that response. And then if I come back over to my database code, now I don't have any HTTP stuff. All I do is I'm going to say raise a not found exception book with a book ID. And this can be a really powerful pattern. In fact, if you decide later at some other point in the application that you want to use this get book method, but you don't want to blow up immediately, you can do like a try except sort of block and say, cool, if it didn't get found, I know it's not in the database, so maybe I'll do something else with it. And so this can give you a bunch of flexibility. And now this is nice because I can now reuse this not found exception sort of throughout my application. I have one central place where I define that JSON response, and it's going to stay that way for every other object. So this is sort of, I think, the best, most maintainable way to do some of these like common exceptions for things that we're going to encounter often, like, for example, a not found exception. Any questions about that? So for the assignment you're doing, there's, I think there's 4 routes where you have to handle a 404. So if you want to, you can just do the JSON response in the route, like the first option. The HTTP exception idea isn't going to work because the specification doesn't have that detail keyword, so that one isn't really an option here. And then this one, I think it's worthwhile to put the work in and get this going, and then and use it. I think it's worth putting the time in. So something along these lines. I think I made like an exceptions module and started putting all of my exceptions there, and that was pretty good. Also, if you you can get fancy about this, and in the exceptions module, I could have like, I could have a base class that's for like the bad requests for all the 400s. And then I can subclass that and have different error codes and error messages. And then I only have to handle the like parent class, the bad request exception, and just say trust whatever the response is. And so that can be like a nice way to use some object-oriented programming to not have to handle all the exceptions. Just say handle all of my custom exceptions by deferring to whatever it says in responses. So, yeah. Chase asks on Piazza, how do we document these error responses? And the idea here is that you can return those responses and they're great, but they don't show up automatically in the documentation. They just so they don't show up as like an example, they don't show up in the schema, they're just sort of nowhere to be found. And so the way you can do this is you can define a pydantic model with the response shape and then modify the JSON response content to be the pydantic model. And then in the route, there's a responses keyword where you can put more information. So here's the custom exception, the new version. So I'm going to have this not found pydantic model. And then I'm going to change, instead of like storing self.message, I'm just going to store self.content as this not found object with a message. And then when I go to return the response, I'll just say content equals self.content. And so now I've got this pydantic model. So nothing has changed. The response looks exactly the same. So and the documentation will look the same. So there's no advantage yet to doing this. But then we come over to the router and we add this keyword to the decorator function that says, hey, 404s here are going to look like this. And you can specify the model to be the pydantic model. And optionally, you can add a description for what that is. And then when you do this, it'll show up in like the like set of like responses that you could get from a route, with much nicer documentation. So let's see if we can like hurry and put this in before we run out of time. So I've got exceptions here. I'm going to get rid of this. We're going to do the nice version. So we're going to say from pydantic import base model class. We'll just call this. We'll just call this entity not found response. We'll say that this has an error. It has a message. And then down here, I'm just going to inherit from exception instead of HTTP exception. And then down here, I'm just gonna say. We're gonna say self content equals. You know, found response with this stuff. Keyword arguments. So now I've got this going on, and then I can define a response. So I'll input this from Fast API, and I'll return a JSON response. Here it says status code equals 404, content equals self.content. So just mimicking basically what we had before. And then, so I was already, I think, using that in places. And so now I just have to come over here and say, the backend exceptions, let's import the not found exception. And then we'll say app exception handler and not found. Say handler found. And this takes in 2 arguments. It takes in a request object. And it takes in the exception. And then we'll just return the exception response. And so now if I come back over to my, I think this one authors, and I can add responses here that says 404 model be not found. And so just with that, if we come back to the documentation, as long as I didn't break everything, then down here, I thought I would see it. Something is broken. What is broken? Everything is broken. Oh, yeah, I did the wrong thing. Not entity not found, it was that not found response. That was what we needed. So I didn't pick good names for this, so it wasn't that. Oh, it was entity not found response. Okay, now my stuff is happy. So now we should see that, hey, my 404 shows up as a not found response and it has documentation, which is great. And it shows up down here as well with, you know, this is why the name that I picked was really bad. So I should have picked a nicer name. So it looks good in the documentation, but I can see that this is here and now I can kind of use it everywhere. And so that's how you get the dots to show your different, the shape of your different error bodies. Okay, any questions? All right, see you next time.
Yeah.